Can I introduce myself? I am Stephen Tomkins, an Emeritus Fellow of Homerton College, and what I'm going to do is tell you a few small things about the gardens of the college. We're here on a lovely mid-September morning with the sun shining. I'm on the main college lawn, and behind me is the Cavendish building, which many of you will know. What I want to do is tell you why I have such a passion for this garden. I came to Homerton in 1992 and succeeded John Hammond as head of biology and head of science. And I also remember very clearly his predecessor, William Palmer, who was a distinguished Cambridge educational naturalist and biologist. Where we are standing now is by the edge of the orchard, beside a long straight row of old trees, some of which are ancient oaks. And I have looked at the map of the land upon which Cavendish College and Homerton College were constructed, and on the enclosure map of 1804, it is quite clear that this is a hedgerow. And here we can expect to find the very oldest trees that are in the college grounds. This old oak tree is planted in that hedgerow. It is at least 200 years old, and it's in its middle age. I'm standing now in the college orchard. This, I suppose we should say, is the new orchard, because the old orchard used to be further back in the college grounds on what is now a playing field next to the railway line. The new orchard was planted after the Second World War, and it contains a variety of important fruit varieties. And the range of eating apples and cooking apples here is really a very good collection. I want to tell you very quickly about one important lady at Homerton who, after the First World War, was in charge of growing food for the college. She planted that early first orchard, and several tons and many hundredweights and pounds of fruit were produced annually by the gardeners to feed the college. Dozens of varieties of vegetables are recorded in her notebook. And Miss Smallbone, to give her credit for her name, was the lady who kept this logbook. And it runs for a long period of time, from 1920 until 1970, recording all the plants that were grown in the college garden. One of the trees that Miss Smallbone would have planted, I'm absolutely sure, is the Bramley. I'm underneath one of our Bramleys now, and these are trees which produce the most wonderful cooking apple, as you may know. One of the things that the college is now doing is making use of the fact that it still grows food. And these apples are annually juiced to make Homerton apple juice. One of the things that I am most passionate about at Homerton is the fact that we still retain here some of the meadowland which was enclosed 200 or 300 years ago. That is really important because the biodiversity of our meadow plants is important. There are still probably something like 20 grass species in this meadow, and that is more than you get in most lawns. Down at my feet here, you've got some of the meadow flora that we're proud still to have. At this time of year, you get field scabious still remaining, which is a plant loved by bumblebees. So in high summer here, we have butterflies galore, and bumblebees and beetles and every kind of wildlife you can think of. And the college actually has a very good bird fauna. We're lucky to have 2 species of woodpeckers, things like mistle thrushes and stock doves, which are not common birds in the middle of a city like this. So let us hold on to these green spaces. They are really precious, and the future will, I think, judge us to be well advised to have conserved them. One of the things that Homerton is able to do is to, in its orchards, conserve the biodiversity of fruit trees. This is not an apple tree, as many of you might know, but a quince. And a quince is a very special tree which grew wild in Mesopotamia and slowly got into the ancient Roman Empire and arrived in Britain within the last few centuries only. But the quince is really special. You can pick it when it's like this, in its lovely lime green phase in the autumn, chop it up, boil it up, and make the most delectable, brilliant ruby red quince jelly. A decade ago, when the college received its charter, we decided to mark that occasion with a tree that will last. And Cape Pretty decided we should have a charter oak. Here it is. It is young. It's probably 20 years old or so now, but it's been for 20 years here, marking the charter of Homerton College. That is a wonderful thing to know, because this tree will be here in 200 years when all of us have gone. In the college archive, we've got this wonderful old postcard, and it shows, indicated here, a little tree. The postcard is 1910, and the oak tree is probably the same sort of age as our charter oak is now. If you stroll across Homerton's wonderful, expansive lawns, you will see for yourself a very fine oak next to the Cavendish building. This is the one which we saw on the postcard. It is now 110 years old, and you can see that these trees last a long time and are full of splendour. One of my favourite trees at Homerton is behind me, and it is this enormous copper beech. It's situated above that lower lawn, which was once a hockey pitch and which is now the lawn surrounding the Mary Ellen building. In the early spring, the copper beech is a lovely pale plum coppery colour, and during the summer it darkens and darkens and darkens until it is almost satanically black. It absorbs almost all the light that falls upon it. It is probably our biggest college tree, and it is one of our oldest, because we know when it was planted. It was planted by the students and staff of Homerton College in 1911 to commemorate the coronation of George V. As it is the autumn, the season of mists and mellow fruitfulness, I had better show you another of our fruit trees. This one is very special, and like the quince, it comes again from the Middle East and has been adopted into Southern Europe first, and now successfully grows in England. Here in my hand is a fruit of the medlar. The medlar is not an apple, but a member of a related group of species, and it is rather special as a food. In the Mediterranean and in the Middle East, when it's ripe, you can eat it and pick when it's picked in the autumn. But in Britain, the long-standing tradition with medlars was to keep them because they're rather bitter in September. keep them into the winter, and by the time you get near Christmas, the fruit has fermented and rotted, and you can eat it with a teaspoon, and it is absolutely delicious, comparable perhaps to ambrosia or truffle or some other culinary joy. In the autumn are floral beds of wonderful roses and lavenders and all sorts of things that we have here during the summer are not at their best. But right now, in the middle of September, the one flower from our borders that I would choose to say something about is the yucca. The yucca comes from Mexico, and it there enjoys the Mediterranean climate that we have on this sunny side of the Cavendish building. The yucca also has some very special ecological features to it. It's pollinated by a moth at night, attracted to its scent and its white coloration. But at the same time, that moth is nourished by the yucca itself. It lays its eggs in the flowers and the fruits, and the yucca rears the baby moths so that when they grow up and mate and transmit and spread, they can do the same job for all the other yuccas. A plant and a moth wedded together in a symbiosis. I'm standing next to a sculpture by Betty Ray, who has a long association with the college, and her sculpture here of a young girl stretching in the morning sunshine says everything that I'm going to say about this terrace and these alcoves of the Cavendish building, which face south. And they are warmed up to such a degree that in summer we have a genuinely Mediterranean climate. Over here on my left are these echiums, which are natives of the Canary Islands. These are not in flower now, because it's September, but earlier in the summer, and here there is one remaining inflorescence in its old age, are some wonderful plants. If you now look at these photographs of the echiums in high summer, you will see what glorious plants they are. They provide an opportunity for bumblebees, honeybees, and many other pollinators to get lots of food for making very needed honey. On my right here is a wonderful ancient tree. This is the maidenhair tree, named after the fact that its leaf is rather like the leaf of a maidenhair fern. Ginkgo biloba. It comes from the Far East, but it used to be worldwide in the Jurassic period. It is literally as old as the dinosaurs. It died out in Europe about 5 million years ago when we knew it as a fossil, but it is a couple of 100 million years old. It is, or was, should I say, in China, venerated as a great tree of great age and no doubt great wisdom. The ones we have at Homerton are quite young, but they are going to last a long time, and like those oaks, they may be here for many centuries. One little bit of information about the ginkgo is important. In the city of Hiroshima, there were 6 ancient ginkgo trees, and they survived the nuclear explosion of those 70 years ago.